number of fish that were now causing their nets to actually break. And frantically, in verse number 7, frantically, Peter and his crew, they were signaling to the boat that was setting a little ways away from them, to their partners in the other boat, for them to come. And they were, come, and help us. So hurrying over to Peter's boat, the other boat came alongside of Peter's boat, and the crew filled both of the boats, both of them. Now, suppose that these boats were like, they were large fishing boats, but of course boats then and boats now are two different things. But these were large fishing boats, so they probably were 5-6 ton apiece. They were pretty good sized boats. But how many fish would it take to fill each one of those boats? So the enormous catch that both boats began to sink under the weight of the fish. So read Luke 5, 8, 9, and 10.
When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partner. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will catch men."
Okay, so the Lord Jesus Christ, see, this was what this was all about, was Peter getting him into the discipleship. The Lord Jesus Christ had just revealed himself to be the God of the universe. And when Peter saw the evidence, that is, this miraculous catch of fish, he knew there was no human answer for it. It had to be a divine thing. And he was overwhelmed with the fact that he was face to face with the holy God. He was in a boat, face to face with the creator of the universe. And he immediately fell down at Jesus' feet, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, go away from me, for I am a sinful man." And Peter realized what had happened. He realized that this catch was not just an accidental thing. He knew the fact that Jesus had called all these fish into this one single spot around his boat. The other boat wasn't affected one way or the other with it. They weren't doing anything over there, which was normal for a daylight day. But Peter now was overwhelmed with all these fish. They got so many fish into the boats that the nets were tearing, and the boats were starting to take on water. And then he realized what had happened. He realized that this was the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, whatever he may have thought about Jesus before this incident, I don't know. But Peter had no doubt now, none whatsoever, that he was God. He was God in the flesh. And he recognized his unworthiness to be in the Lord's presence. And that's why he said, "Oh, Lord, go, get away from me." See, the amazement that had overcome Peter was shared by all of his companions. They were equally overwhelmed by this catch of fish which they had taken. And in verse number 10, Luke, he specifically names James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were partners actually with Peter in his fishing business. So along with Peter, they would form the inner core group of the apostles. And then later, all three of these would see a even more inspiring revelation of Jesus Christ's glory in the transfiguration in Matthew chapter 17. And Jesus, in verse number 10, 11, Jesus said to Simon, do not fear. Don't fear. You can imagine how taken back these people would be. I mean, it would have been enough to, catch as many fish as they did. And so many, they couldn't even get all the fish in the boats. If it had more boats around, it'd have filled them up too. They had all the fish in the lake in this one spot. And they were amazed at this. Nothing like this had ever happened before. They knew that this wasn't just by accident. They knew that God had to be involved in this. And before this, they hadn't even thought of anything like that, They weren't expecting anything on that particular day. And here all at once, and then to realize all at one time that you're in a boat with the creator of the world. And you can understand how they would have been fearful to a degree, not only of catching all these fish, but to really realize all at once that here was the creator of the world. And Jesus said, don't fear, don't fear. From now on, you'll be catching men. And when they had verse number 11, you didn't read that one before. Go ahead and read that for me, somebody, please. Verse number 11.
So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him.
All right, so when they'd brought their boats to land, now, remember, the boats, I don't know how far from shore they were, but they were out in the deeper water. And the boats were filled so full that they were taking on water. And so they headed for shore because they didn't have any place else to put the fish. And no more boats around, I guess. And so they headed for shore, and they brought the boats to the land. And then it says they left everything and followed him. From now on, from that point on, Peter, we'll be catching men. But it's now in the other boat that was out there was Peter's father, because his father was Peter and his father were in the fishing business together, and they brought in the boats, and they however close to the shore they got, because they were weighted down. And then it says that there was three of them now that we're talking about here, not everybody there, but three of them. When they landed, then they just got out of the boat and left. Went with Jesus. He said, from now on, you'll be catching men. Now, it's interesting, at least I thought it was interesting, that the net full of fish had, as King James says, multitudes of fish. Multitudes of fish. And I thought it was interesting that Peter preached to and baptized multitudes of people in the book of Acts. Multitudes. So Jesus said to Simon, do not fear. So there was no need for him to, or his companions, either one, to be terrified by what had just happened, because this was what Jesus was intending to do. Now, just a note, catching men, Jesus said, catching men in the Greek literally means to capture them. To capture them. Now they had spent their lives, because his father had been in the fishing business for a long time, and then that's how Simon got in the fishing business, and so they had spent their lives catching fish for the purpose of killing them. That was what they were in the business of, catching fish to provide food for people. People buy the fish off of them, and so they were catching the fish to kill the fish. Now they would spend the rest of their lives catching men to give them life. So the two of the opposite. So this was Jesus's formal, and we might say a permanent call of these three men to full-time discipleship. So when they had brought their boats into the land, they left everything and followed him. So they I try to put myself in these situations. Peter's father was on the boat. His brother was on the boat. These were people that he knew was on the boat. And so they pulled in, and Jesus said, "Come and follow me." And so they left their home. They left their family. Peter probably turned around and waved at his dad and said, "See you later, Dad." They left their occupation. They left his business, security. They left two boats sitting there on the shore filled with fish, which would have been multitudes of money for them. And they did so, it says, immediately. So at the very peak of their earthly career, after having just made this greatest catch of fish that had ever been seen on this lake before, they just left their boat, turned their back on their fishing business, left everything, and followed Jesus. So the picture I get is that they just simply pulled the boats up on the shore and walked away and left them. Now, I'm assuming that, those that were left probably took the fish and did with them whatever they did with them and continued on with their fishing business. But these three just simply walked away and followed Jesus. All right, verse number 12. We come across a man who's covered with leprosy. Verse number 12. Somebody read that.
Now Jesus was in one of the towns. A man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and begged him, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean."
Okay, so now the exact time and the exact location of the Lord's encounter with this leper is not known. We don't know, but I guess what we know is enough. It occurred during his Galilean ministry. It was in one of the cities or one of the villages that was near the Sea of Galilee. And now understand, leprosy is it's a general term for a number of skin conditions. That's what leprosy is. It's a skin condition. It's like psoriasis, for example. There's a lot of different. That's why you go to a dermatologist. There's a lot of skin conditions, and leprosy was a skin condition. So, meaning that there was different types of leprosy. So, leprosy wasn't a one word that described all. Psoriasis. I have psoriasis. There's no cure for it. But fortunately, mine is not it's just a minor thing. It's just, and the thing with it is that, as it was with the leprosy, it just attacks certain areas. And I have like a place here, it's like the size of a dime on this finger here, and there's a little spot here, and over here, and a couple back here on the back of my neck. I've been to a dermatologist for it, and they give you cream to put on it. There's no cure for it. They don't even know why you get it. But the cream that they give you, it will cause it to disappear for just a period of time. But then it'll come back. One time it's not there anymore. It's gone. Oh, okay, it's gone. but then it'll come back. It always comes back in the same place, and it's a crusty type of a thing. It gets if you don't put anything on it to moisturize it, it gets red, and it gets very itchy. And leprosy now, you could have it severe, like this guy here. This was a severe case. His whole body was covered. You could have it in, like with, as I was describing, in spots. In other words, it was different for different people. So we still have, as we said, I think it was last week, we still have leprosy today, but it's very rare. Very few cases in the United States. Most of it is like in India and places like that. There's, if you're looking worldwide, it's not really, it is very rare. There's only about 20,000 cases per year worldwide, I'm talking about now. But Luke's description of this man as being covered with leprosy, this, at least to me, suggests that he, in fact, had leprosy in the most extreme sense of the term. Now, back in these days, there was no cure for leprosy. Today, leprosy is something like cancer. If you catch it early enough, you can cure it, but it has to be caught early enough. If you don't catch it early enough, as it was in this case, this guy, he had whatever, his particular leprosy was all over his body. So I can only imagine psoriasis all over your body, completely covering your body with the scaling and the itching and all this type of stuff. But leprosy now, it attacks the skin, the surface, the nervous system, especially near the elbows and the knees and the wrists and mucous membrane. What it actually does is it forms lesions. Lesions are scars. That's where your skin breaks open and you get scars on top of it. It forms lesions on the skin, that is, scabs on the skin, and it actually can disfigure the face by the nose collapsing and causing folding of the skin on your face. Some people call it lion's disease. It's because of a lion-like appearance of the face. The thing was that they're like psoriasis. It's like, excuse me, it's like poison ivy. Poison ivy is a skin disease. It's a skin condition. But what happens is you're itching all the time. You're scratching. It. And if you get it on your back, you're in really big trouble because you have to get one of them things you go up and down on your back with it. But with leprosy now, you didn't feel anything. There was no pain to it whatsoever, and there was no feeling, especially in the hands and the feet. And so oftentimes these people would hurt themselves and not even knowing they were hurting themselves. Like if I'm not saying numbness now. I'm just saying there's no feeling there, not numbness, no feeling. It'd be like if you had in the hand, you had no feeling, then a flame, or even, let's say, a burner on a stove or anything like that, you can put your hand on it and you wouldn't feel anything. But what would you do to your hand? And this man here, his whole body was like that. In other words, you couldn't shave because you couldn't feel the pressure. You wouldn't know whether you was cutting yourself, whether you wasn't cutting yourself. You wouldn't know when you was doing harm to yourself. And this was the biggest problem with it. A lot of these people harmed themselves, and they didn't even know that they were harming themselves, and they could disfigure themselves not even knowing that they were doing this. And verse number 12, somebody read that for us.
Now Jesus was in one of the towns. A man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell on his face to the ground and begged him, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean.
So this poor tragic outcast, and they were outcasts, there was no hope for this man. He had no hope. Jesus was his only hope. And so he wasn't concerned about disobeying the law of Moses. He was only concerned with one thing, and that was getting to Jesus, because he knew that Jesus could heal him. Humanly speaking, his disease was incurable. It was just incurable. And it was also, a sad part about it, at that time, it was seen as God's punishment for his sins. And you know, oftentimes, there was more of that then than there is today, but, you know, sometimes, you know, God punishes us because of our sins. But this was not the case with these, that they had leprosy. You know, it's not that, let's say you get the flu and die, and that's because you had sins and God punished you for it. That was what Job's problem was. Excuse me, I get a... That was what Job's problem was. They were accusing him of having sins when it wasn't his sins at all that was causing what his problem was. So anyway, having heard about Jesus, he came looking for him. Now remember, we got this crowd of people here, and he saw Jesus, and he approached Jesus, and that was not good on his part, since lepers were strictly forbidden to come near other people. You know, they had this social distance. They weren't allowed to interact with anyone. In other words, they weren't allowed to have a lot of people around. They could only interact with other lepers. And so great was the fear of catching it that lepers were forbidden to come to Jerusalem. They were forbidden to go into any walled city. They were forbidden to come within 6 feet of any healthy person. And it was 100 and I think it was 150 feet if the wind was blowing in the direction of the leopard. So they were restricted to a spatial compartment in the synagogue. And I read where one rabbi, I'm assuming it's the truth, one rabbi refused to eat an egg bought on a street where there was a leper. That's how concerned they were with it. So, verse number 12, coming to Jesus, the leopard fell on his face. Now, whatever his understanding of Jesus was, he was convinced of one thing. He was convinced that he was sent by God, and he called him Lord. And in verse 13, Jesus said, I am willing. I'm willing. The man said, if you're willing. And Jesus said, I'm willing. Now the man was was close enough for Jesus to touch him, which was against the law of Moses to begin with. But anyway, he said, I'm willing. And then what happened? Read verse 13.
Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said. Be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him.
Now, think about that for a minute. This, you know, it's amazing. Jesus, you know, he called all these fish that was in this lake to one point. Now, how he did that, I don't know, but he did. And he told Peter to go, and the first fish you catch, you're going to find a coin in his mouth. Peter did, and the coin was there. And remember now when he healed Peter's mother-in-law, he said to the fever, what? He spoke to the fever now. He said, what? Get out of there. And what happened? The fever left. Now here we have a man with leprosy, and he said, if you're willing, cure me. And Jesus said, okay, I'm willing. And he said, be cleansed. And what happened?
Leprosy left.
Immediately, what? The leprosy, the infection, the problem that this man had, it left him. As was the case with all of Jesus' healing, the leper was healed immediately, completely. There was no lingering recovery time. You know, like you got a skin infection, whatever it may be. They give you, you buy cream, you put the cream on it. Then what? You wait for it to heal, right? You put it on 2 or 3 times a day. And 2 or 3 times a day, and then it gets a little bit better, and a little bit better, a little bit better. After a period of time, then it's gone, hopefully. But this wasn't the case here. Jesus spoke to the problem, and the problem, which was leprosy, a skin disorder, left him, and he was completely healed instantly without any period of recovery time, not waiting for it to just gradually get better over a period of time. The disfigurement caused by the man's leprosy was also healed, leaving no trace whatsoever of the disease or its effect on his body. He was healed, restored physically. He was fit to take immediately a long journey into Jerusalem, because Jesus, in verse 14, and we'll close on this, read verse 14 for us.
Then Jesus ordered him, don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commands for your cleansing as a testimony to them.
All right, so Jesus had a purpose in telling him to go there. This was a testimony. And so now here was a man who had no hope whatsoever, none. And he said, if you're willing, Lord, heal me. Jesus said, I'm willing. And he said, be gone, get out of here, leprosy, you're done with. And it left him. And then he said, now this is what I want you to do. I want you to go to Jerusalem, go to the priest. Now this was in Leviticus, I think chapter 14 describes all of this. That was involved in it. But did this man do what he was told to do? Look at Mark, and we'll close on this. Mark chapter 1 and verse 45. Mark chapter 1 and verse 45.
145. Instead, he went out and began to talk freely, spreading the news. As a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but stayed outside in lonely places. Yet the people still came to him from everywhere.
Now, you would have thought that the man would have done what Jesus told him to do. I can understand being healed, the excitement he probably had. But the problem was that by him not going and by him telling everybody of what was going on, this hindered Jesus' ministry. Jesus couldn't go into a town. The crowds were so great, there were so many people wanting to see him, that he had to stay out away from the towns. And even at that, out in the desertless places, the people would flock. They were hunting for him, they were searching for him. And when they'd find him, the news would spread so quickly that crowds would gather around him. And finally, he just had to go completely away from the people, which actually did what? It stopped what Jesus had come to do, and that was to spread the good news. All right, so we'll close there. Any questions or any input?